We are racing in 2023, so let's talk about the Bahrain Grand Prix. Hello everyone, yes, my name is BaxtyB and welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be talking about the first race of 2023, which was the Bahrain Grand Prix. It took place yesterday, and look, let's be honest here, it wasn't the most exciting race in the world. I mean, look, there was some good racing. I think Fernando Alonso had some fantastic racing with George Russell, with Lewis Hamilton in particular, did that beautiful move, cutting inside him at turn 10. That was absolutely sensational. And then also a nice little fight with Carlos Sainz as well for the final podium spot after Charles Leclerc's retirement. And Ferrari, another disaster plan. I'll get into all of this when I do my driver ratings, but let's have a look at the full race results. Max Verstappen on pole, took a fairly easy pole position. He was on pole by just over a tenth of a second from his teammate Sergio Perez. They came home 1-2 and they were joined on the podium by Fernando Alonso. Now, based off my predictions, I was actually pretty much all there apart from that last podium spot. I did actually predict Lewis Hamilton as the final podium finisher, but look, we're going to talk about Mercedes in a bit, but Alonso, brilliant debut for Aston Martin. They were the story of testing. We said the pace was real, and look, Alonso proved it. He was magnificent, fully deserved that third place. He did some ballsy overtakes and did have to overcome a little bit of pain in the early part of the race when he was hit by his teammate. So when I created the channel, I said that I was going to be doing driver ratings, and let me be very clear, my word is final, or as my good friend Shez put it, voila, here are my first ratings of the 2023 season for the Bahrain Grand Prix, and let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. I've done it in Constructors' Championship order from 2022, so from Red Bull all the way down to Williams. So Max Verstappen, race win, pole, dominant. I don't think there was ever a point. He was briefly not in the lead during the pit stops, but I mean, it couldn't have gone any better for the world champion, really. And it's hard to see beyond a Max Verstappen World Championship at the moment. He looked so good. I have to give him a 10. It was the perfect weekend. I know they had some issues on Friday, but honestly, I only focus on qualifying and the race, and in those two things, he was flawless. Absolutely flawless. Sergio Perez, I've given him a 9. Look, he was pretty close in qualifying, a tenth of a second to Max Verstappen. For him, that's pretty good. In the race, he did lose a place to Leclerc off the line, and he just then kind of, once he got past Leclerc again, he just kind of coasted around, never really threatened at making a comeback on Verstappen. They were both comfortable. They got the 1-2. What could you ask for? But because he did make lose that place at the start, I'm going to give Perez a 9. But he really didn't do much wrong other than that, to be honest. Okay, so we get to the Ferrari boys, starting with Charles Leclerc. Oh, Charles Leclerc. Look, I've given him an 8 even though he retired, because I don't think Charles Leclerc did anything wrong. He qualified probably in the best position he could have done. I think he would have been closer than the 3 or so tenths behind he was. But they decided not to go for the second run. They wanted to save tyres, and that made absolute sense. He had third place locked down, and then unfortunately his engine gave out. Once again, the Ferrari disaster plan has started, and it started a lot earlier this year as well. Real problems for Leclerc. That was a damaging result already in the first race, to lose so much ground to Verstappen. But to all the Charles Leclerc fans out there, take solace in this, that when Charles won last year, Max DNF'd, and then Max won the title by 140 points. So cling on to that for the time being, though. Not sure not sure how long you can do that for. Carlos Sainz, again, didn't really do much wrong. Qualified P4, finished P4, had decent pace, was powerless to stop Alonso, really, when it came to that. Yeah, the Ferrari has clearly got an issue with chewing its tyres. I've seen Carlos getting some unnecessary crap from Leclerc fans online. Carlos did nothing wrong, and he gets an 8. You know, solid performance from Carlos. He couldn't have done any more. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton are up next. Now, look, I'm going to do a bigger video on Mercedes probably next week. But let me be very clear. Mercedes are not winning a championship this year. It is not happening. As much as I want to sit here and say, oh, it's okay, it's only the first race, and I was doing that after the race yesterday in Spaces, but I've had some time to think on it over the last sort of 12 hours, and it's not happening. It's just not happening. They've got the concept wrong. Toto Wolff has admitted it, and there ain't much more that we can do as a team other than just pray and hope that in 2024 that they can do something. I think that they're going to change the concept. I don't know how much they're going to develop it outside of the wind tunnel. Wouldn't surprise me if they do something similar to what Aston did last year. But yeah, real problems for Mercedes. Real problems. Look, this team is still good enough to win races this year, I think. Not sure. And look, we've got the best driver lineup on the grid in Russell and Hamilton. But yeah, yesterday was a very sobering day for a Mercedes fan. Look, I'm giving George a 7. He had an awful start. He outqualified Lewis, actually. He took P6 ahead of Lewis, but he had an awful start. Absolutely awful start. Lost places to Hamilton and Stroll. Got past Stroll, then got past Alonso after the Astons had a little get-together on the first lap. But, yeah, he had a decent fight with Alonso. And he showed some decent pace in the early stint as well. He was a bit quicker than Hamilton, but wasn't able to really make an impression with that pace. And then he had to defend against Alonso. Then he got overtaken. And then he got, he had a bad. The first pit stop he had was poor. Then he got overtaken by Stroll, and then he just spent the entire race looking at his exhaust pipe, and he couldn't get close to him. It's a 7 for George. It was a solid weekend, unspectacular though. Lewis, I've gone slightly higher. I've given him an 8. He was outqualified by George, but I think actually in the race he did as good a job as he could. Yeah, he got a very good start. I think he probably had the best start of everyone. He was fantastic, really, really good. Great battle with Alonso as well. That was a real sort of nostalgic throwback to see those two go at it. It was awesome, and when Alonso thought he got past him, and then Lewis just slammed his way back through at turn 4. That was fantastic stuff, and he was powerless to stop Alonso in the end. But the thing that worried me actually for Mercedes was the way in which Lewis couldn't quite get close enough to Sainz. He just couldn't quite do it, and that is, for me, is the biggest concern for Mercedes right now, is the fact that you had a Ferrari on dying tyres and we couldn't make an impression. But that's my bit on Mercedes just now. I want to do a fuller video on this, and I'm sure that I'll be talking about this a lot with Cameron and Shez on the Shakedown as well, because we need to talk about it, that's for sure. Okay, Alpine. Oh, right. Esteban Ocon had probably the worst race I have ever seen anyone have. I mean, holy crap. He got... And that's after a very good qualifying performance. I think a lot of people, including myself, had written Alpine off, but he got it into Q3. I mean, fair play to him. Really good qualifying performance, but after that, it just went from bad to worse to worse. Oh Lord, what happened? I mean, he was too far forward in his grid box, so he got a penalty. He serves the penalty. His mechanics start working on the car 0.4 of a second too quick, so that's a 10-second penalty. And then as he goes to serve the 10-second penalty, he speeds down the pit lane and gets another 5-second penalty. He eventually retired because I think they just thought, we're just going to stop for the day. We're not going to carry on with this. But oh, Esteban, that was about as bad an opening race as you could have hoped for. But Pierre Gasly, on his debut for Alpine, did spare their blushes somewhat. In complete contrast, I mean, to Ocon, he had they had opposite weekends. Gasly, awful in qualifying, didn't get out of Q1. His second lap time, which wouldn't have been good enough to get out of Q1, actually ended up getting deleted. So he started at the back of the grid, but he fought back and came ninth and produced a beautiful little move on Alex Albon for that position. Went right round the outside of him at turn 1. It was a fantastic move, and actually for me, Pierre was my driver of the day. I thought he did an amazing job to recover from 20th, and on debut score points for Alpine, particularly when the other car was just having a complete meltdown. 3 for Ocon, 7 for Gasly. They could do a lot better. But I think Alpine, they've taken a step back. But I think, these ratings I think are about as high as I could go for Ocon and Gasly. I mean, Ocon's score is based purely on qualifying. Okay, McLaren. Oh, McLaren. McLaren hold a special place in my heart. Obviously, as a Lewis fan, it's where Lewis started his career. But that was a shocker. I mean... This was 2015 levels of bad for McLaren. This was so awful. Norris I've given a 7 because Norris's qualifying was brilliant. I mean, he was not far off Q3 even, not far off at all. He was only about 2 tenths slower than Stroll. Stroll got through in that last place, and I tell you what, to be that close to Lance Stroll in that Aston Martin, that's an impressive effort by Lando Norris. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Meanwhile, of course, before we go on to Piastri, of course, Norris had the issue with his engine as well. I mean, he pitted something like 5 times because they had to get air into the engine. So Norris, but when Norris was driving, he had really good pace. In comparison to those around McLaren, so the likes of the Alpines and the AlphaTauris and the Williams, he had some fairly decent pace. So did his teammate Oscar Piastri. He had a terrible qualifying, was P18 I think in qualifying, awful first qualifying session, and in the very short time that he was in the Grand Prix, because he only lasted something like 12-13 laps, he actually looked pretty feisty. He got himself up from 18th. I think he was maybe had his eyes on points, but then his car failed. They went to change his steering wheel and the car just stopped. I think he had an electronics issue. McLaren didn't have a double DNF. I think I know why they didn't have a double DNF, because Bahrain is a huge financial investor into McLaren and they did not want a double DNF in Bahrain. But this was as bad as race I've seen for McLaren for some time. The car isn't good, and they nearly double DNF'd. They pretty much double DNF'd. It's not a good day at the office. Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Good race. He had a really good race. At one point was up to a genuine P6 after the pit stops. Ended up finishing P8 ahead of Gasly and Albon, and we'll talk about Albon in a minute, but I thought Bottas had a good race. I thought he did really well. Qualified 11th, had a great start, fought his way up. Fantastic job by Bottas. Really solid opening weekend for him. And Zhou Guan Yu, look, wasn't quite at the races. He was a little bit off Bottas, and you know what? He's closer. And I think this is going to be a very interesting little teammate battle. Didn't score any points. They sacrificed him at the end because they wanted to get him the fastest lap, because Gasly was on to get an extra point, and Alfa Romeo decided that they were going to take that off him. But another very solid weekend for Zhou. It will give him a bit of confidence because he's under pressure, because Théo Pourchaire is gunning for his seat. He was dominant in FT this weekend, and that was a good first weekend for Zhou, but he needs to score more points. So hopefully he can get himself going and score more points this season to try and hold on to that seat. Now, Aston Martin, really the story of the weekend. I mean, we didn't know if their pace was genuine, and I think it's fair to say they have the second quickest car. I think in race trim they're quicker than Ferrari, because they're a lot kinder on their tyres. Let's start with Alonso. Started P5 and he finished P3 on the podium, his 99th podium in the sport. He gets a 9. I don't think he qualified as well. I think he could have out-qualified Carlos Sainz, to be honest with you, but they only gave him the one run. but he beat both Mercedes drivers, and he looked sensational. His racecraft was... Oh, I mean, he had battles with Sainz, Russell, Hamilton, and he did numbers on all of them. I mean, it was a magnificent performance by Alonso, and honestly, I think Alonso is the only hope we have for any form of competitive championship. I didn't think I'd be saying that. Lance Stroll as well. Look, Lance Stroll deserves a hell of a lot of credit. He's come back from a pretty bad injury, 2 broken wrists and a broken toe. He's got screws. He's not 100% fit. Does a full race distance, finishes P6 ahead of one of the Mercedes drivers, qualifies P8. I think that's a sensational effort by Lance Stroll. He was very close to my driver of the day, and he's only going to get stronger as Aston gets stronger. And I think we're going to see some 2020 Lance Stroll, I think, which is a good thing, because 2020 Lance Stroll I was excited about. So good to see Stroll have a little bit of his mojo back. And he gets a very deserved 8 from me. Kevin Magnussen now with Haas. Oh, Kev, not the greatest qualifying. Then they stuck him on hard tyres. He didn't really make any progress with that. He was trundling around near the back. Has to be a 6. Hulkenberg gets a 7 because he had a very good qualifying. He got into Q3. But in the race he lost a lot of places early on, and then late on in the race he got a penalty for exceeding track limits, and then actually ended up finishing behind Magnussen. So a mixed weekend for Hulkenberg, but he will feel he can do a job, and he gets a 7 purely on his qualifying with Magnussen. Now, AlphaTauri, Tsunoda and De Vries. Yuki Tsunoda, I think, had a really good weekend for him. You know, a lot of people putting pressure on him, basically saying, oh, he's going to be gone at the end of the year. Nick De Vries is going to destroy him. Well, he destroyed Nick De Vries this weekend. He had him under control, and actually had one of the better overtakes of the race quite late on. Nick De Vries and Zhou were battling away, and that battle saw Yuki kind of nick past both of them. It was a wonderful performance by him. A decent qualifying as well. You know, P14 doesn't sound like a lot, but I think that was the maximum AlphaTauri could have asked for, and Tsunoda delivered. He is a Bahrain specialist. He's always gone well in Bahrain, so perhaps the result does flatter him somewhat in comparison to De Vries, but that was a really strong opening weekend from Yuki Tsunoda. Gets a 7 from me. De Vries, not good. I was actually pretty close to giving Nick a 5, but yeah, he raced pretty well. His qualifying was not good, and he was quite a long way off Yuki as well. So yeah, because Yuki was quite close to the points. He finished P11, and Nick was quite a long way down. So yeah, he's got work to do. He gets a 6, work to do. And then the Williams drivers, Albon and Sargent, both getting an 8. Alex scored a point, came 10th. Really good performance by him, and he had a decent qualifying as well. He qualified 15th, but he felt he could have got to Q3. He had a bit of a problem with the car in Q2, so he didn't set a time. But he looked good. That Williams on that Bahrain track looked fantastic. And Logan Sargent, the rookie of the weekend, he had a fantastic effort. P12. He was the fastest rookie in qualifying. He qualified P16, would have made Q2 had Lando Norris not set his time before. He was completely equal with time on Norris. Logan is looking really good. He's really settled into that Williams, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he progresses, because that was as good an opening weekend from a rookie that I've seen for a long time. And I think he'll score points. And I think Williams may have just made a decent signing here with Logan Sargent. He did not disappoint. Good effort so far. So yeah, there you have it. Those are the driver ratings for the Bahrain Grand Prix. If there's anything you want to talk to me about, I'm probably going to do a live stream either tonight or tomorrow, and we can discuss it further whilst I play some fighting games. But yeah, look, the race wasn't a classic. We had some good moments, but it wasn't a classic. As a Mercedes fan, I am worried, and we are going to have to talk about that. But look, we're underway in 2023. I'm looking forward to doing more of these with you in the future. And if you want to see more of my content, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button, hit the like button as well, because that seems to do nice things for the algorithm. And look, give me your views in the comments. I'll happily talk to any of you about what it is you thought of the Bahrain Grand Prix. But until next time, guys, stay safe, and I shall speak to you all very, very soon.